This week on It's Clear as Mud.
I'm testing the mic. I'm testing the mic. I'm not going to be one of those guys that begs for your subscription. Nope. I'm just not going to do I'm Jeff Patterson, and I'm going to give you a brief demo of where we were with the last video so that you got to have an idea of what we're doing. And we're set up with our tools, and I recommend going back to the first video and checking out the tool setup, and then the second video for exactly how I want you to throw these balls. So we are throwing 1 pound balls, and we're trying to do it in 3 pulls. And we're trying to get to 100 balls. So we center, and we experience the clay coming up by pushing on the outside. That was one of the feelies that we did. We opened it up, re-centered, which is great if you're having trouble centering, and you're going to need this in a little while when I show you how to put a foot on a bowl. Your rib, which is in the bucket, comes out and cleans off the bottom. Goes back in the bucket. Want your tools where they're supposed to be so you don't have to think about them. Now we're pushing in from the outside with the sponge. You can do it with a knuckle, and we're pinching with the fingers on the inside. I use my middle finger, and they're opposing each other, and we go in 1 pull. Repeat that by pushing in on the bottom with the sponge, pinching in with the fingers. Most of this is happening in the pinch, not with the sponge. The sponge is just controlling the water. Our second pull, we're not going over the top. Our third pull is a rib pull. A little water down the side. Go down and pick up the clay on the bottom. We have the rib at 2 angles. We have it gliding on the pot this way, and we have it twisted that way. And we're picking up the clay on the bottom, and we're throwing this to the pointer. We're not concerned about thickness. We're not concerned about thinness or evenness. We're just throwing it to the pointer. That's all we're trying to concentrate on now. Clean up the rim. Clean out the water from the inside. And you see, I'm grabbing my tools. I'm not having to think about them. They are where they're supposed to be, and that's in that first video. That'll tell you what you need to know. Take your knife tool, go down and scrape off some of the slurm and the clay from the bottom. Take your wire tool, which is missing, unfortunately. See, you think you have it all together, and you don't. Take your wire tool, which should be living over your towel here. Take your wire tool and cut it off. Take your sponge and clean your hands off. Get all the junk off of your hands so you can keep that slip and stuff off of your towel. Your towel is slightly dirty, has some clay, so you pick up a little dust. You do a 6-part hold. I'm going to try this again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You put them on the bottom, right where the floor of the pot is. You pop the back of it off, and you set it aside. So, if you've gotten to 100 of those, you're a mighty person, because that other tape really hasn't been out long enough for you to actually get to that point. But you're pretty soon going to be at 50, and at 50, I encourage you to start thinking about putting handles on them. If you're happy with them, build an Etsy site, get an Instagram account, and start selling these things. Rome wasn't built in a day. A pile of sand is moved 1 shovel at a time. If I was to try for perfection in making YouTube videos, I would have given up 2 weeks ago and just gone and played with the dog. You need to get something out there. And it's amazing the parallels between what you folks are trying to accomplish and what I'm trying to accomplish here. So now we're going to move on to a bowl. And the bowl is done with a 1.5 pound ball. And it's done the same way as you did before. We just pull it open. We just pull it a little further open. So we center. Now you can cone up here if you want. I've been reprocessing this clay while demoing, and so I'm not really thrilled with the consistency, and it's nice to have a nice smooth consistency, so coning does help that. But for bowls, I also like a little bit harder clay, and I'm going to show you a trick for making bowls, which I really like. And we're going to open just like we did before, leaving a little extra clay at the bottom because it's a bowl, but not much because we aren't going to do much trimming. This is a production bowl. We're going to open it up a little wider. We're going to recenter it. And we're going to clean up that bottom, but we're not going to take the rib all the way off to the side. We're just going to clean it up because it's going to get cleaned up again in a minute. So now we're going to do the same pulls. Pull up once and go in. Go down to the bottom, pick it up again, go in and up, and not going over the top. We're leaving a bit of a bulbous top on this, and the reason that is because that acts as reinforcement. Now here's the tool we looked at last time. I said you're going to need one. I have a bunch of them. You can make one out of a credit card by taking a mason can lid and drawing a pattern on there and then cutting it out. I have, for larger bowls, used CDs. For really big bowls, I have one made out of plexiglass. And for this, I have one that I made out of vinyl roofing or siding material off of a church in the town I used to live in. Here's one made out of a credit card, AARP card. That's embarrassing. So here's the secret to this. A lot of people start at the bottom and start shaping their bowls out. What I like to do is I like to come into the bowl and I like to clean up the bottom now, ahead of shaping it, because all of this is about getting it shaped in a minute. Then I come in and I scrape it off using my metal rib, do a nice little rib hole, get the moisture off the outside, and I get the outside looking how I want it to look, nice and smooth. And then I come in with my rib, and I come in from the top. Everybody seems to want to shape it and come in from the bottom, but I come in from the top, get a little water on it, start pushing on that outer lip, and form the bowl. Now you'll notice there's not a lot of wobble in the bowl. You know, I can come in and take that out and I can also still come in and clean up the bottom with my rib, like so. Then if I want to, I can come over the top with my chamois, clean up my lip, and even bend it out and make it a little bit more fancy. And in bending, that also creates some rigidity in that lip, makes it a little easier to pick up. Now the outside of my pot's dry right now, so I can go in and clean it up with a sponge a little bit, make sure everything inside is how I like it to be. Now we're in the same position we were before. We cut the pot off. We clean off our hands. And before we go any further, and we should have done is we should have set this gauge. You make your first bowl and then you set your gauge, and now you know where all the rest of your bowls have to go to. So I could continue to throw to that gauge over and over and over again all day long. Now get a little powder on your hands, clean your hands off, go in with a little 2-part or 6-part hole, pop the back, and set it off to the side. Just that simple. Now, I like bowls on a bat system, and we're going to get there. If you don't have a bat system or you have very few bats, because I don't like my bowls warped. I don't like any of my pottery warped. So you might be happier lifting a bowl with a bat than you would be lifting it with just the standard method. So here's what I made last night. We're going to tap it into center. Let's dry that wheel head a little bit. We're going to tap it into center. Now, see, the thing about production is it's nice to remove some of the effort. And so some of the work that comes along. And part of that is trimming. Trimming is a huge thing. I make these funny little wads. I pinch them in my fingers and I have these nice little bumps, and I can attach the bumps onto the side of the pot, fix my pot to the wheel head. And grab a trim tool and take that excess clay off. Now, there isn't a lot of clay on here because I didn't leave a lot of clay down here. I'm not anticipating carving a foot out of this. I'm just anticipating trimming it off and having it be round. Get rid of the excess clay and have a nice bottom. I don't even much go into this area in the center. It's a little out of round, but I'm not going to worry about that too much for demo purposes. Then come in and decide where you want your foot and score it while it's on the wheel. And this is called throwing a foot, and this is where I really got hooked on recentering, when I understood that I could take a piece of clay that was on the wheel and flopping around out there giving me a hard time, and I could recenter it. Now, if you have an extruder, that's great. There's some really nice little extruders you can build. This is slip on top of the scoring. Some really nice little extruders that you can build out of a caulking gun. But I'm just doing it in a coil. Roll the coil out, since that's what most of you are going to have access to, and tap down a coil of clay. Now, the wheel is turning that way, and so what I would prefer to have is this one on top and that one on the bottom, so that I don't catch it and pull it off. So here's the recentering thing again, right? We saw this earlier in the recentering, and this is where I picked it up. This is where you get the goal posting. You get the 2 fingers up and the thing. I'm going to use my sponge across instead of the cross arm, and recenter that. Put a little water on there and recenter that foot. Now you can do the same thing with it. You can bring it up, you can push it down. You can come in with a rib and clean it up on the inside. And you can clean it up on the outside. You can make a little groove underneath here if you want to. Make it easier to grab onto it with a pair of tongs and dip it in the glaze bucket. All sorts of stuff available to you with a thrown foot. And another thing we're gonna talk about here in the next video or so is how to sign your pottery and what you should be doing as a professional or even as a serious person. You should be signing these. And so we're gonna make a little chop. I have little chops that I've been using. I've used different ones over the years. Make a little chop, put it on the side, sign your pot. Make any last minute adjustments. Take your balls of clay off and set it aside. Okay, this is going to be a short video. I'm going to start trying to make them shorter, not be so lengthy and talkative. So think about what's happening with your cylinders. Are they getting good? Are you able to smooth them out with a thumb on the bottom and put a handle on them? We'll look at handles, we'll look at extruders in the next video, and we will start turning some of these cylinders that you've been throwing into mugs. Thanks much.